Let's talk about how to make matcha foam. In this video, we're going to break down why your matcha isn't foaming and also share with you a few tips on how you can improve your matcha making and how to make a frothy matcha at home. Before we get started, it would really mean a lot to us if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel and stay tuned for future tea videos. We have hundreds of videos on all sorts of topics related to Japanese green tea, but for this episode, we're going to focus on matcha specifically. Without further ado, let's get started. First, what is matcha foam? A well-made matcha tea will naturally form a foam on top of it. This is likely to do with the combination of the saponin content as well as the amino acids. Some matcha produces more foam than others, and this is considered to be a quality indicator by many matcha drinkers. Why is matcha foam important? First, let's briefly discuss why you want a foam on top of your matcha. This foam isn't just to make the matcha look nice, it also aerates the tea, giving it a smoother texture and a creamier taste. A high-quality matcha should almost taste like a latte, even without adding any milk or sugar. The foam creates this effect by giving it a light and airy consistency. Although we show this matcha foam in a lot of our videos, many people tell us they are not able to recreate it with their own matcha at home, so we wanted to create a small guide to explain what might be going wrong. When it comes to how to make matcha foam, there are 5 important things you should be thinking about. After watching this video, you should be an expert on making foamy bowls of matcha right in your very own home. Tip number 1, get the right tools. Before you make a bowl of matcha tea, make sure you have all the right tools. The most important tool when it comes to making a foam is the chasen or bamboo tea whisk. This tool is made out of a single piece of bamboo, and the 100 small bristles move through the water quickly to aerate the tea. Compared to a metal whisk, the bamboo whisk creates a lot more foam, and it does so more quietly, making it a better fit for your morning matcha routine. Tip number 2, buy premium matcha. If you really want to learn how to make matcha foam like a pro, you should buy some premium matcha powder. You can actually test the quality of a matcha by how well it foams. High quality matcha is rich in amino acids, which should be easy to foam up, but when you use a low quality matcha, it can be very difficult to produce a foam. When you go for first harvest, ceremonial grade matcha, not only will you get a better taste from your matcha, but you'll also get a better foam as well. Tip number 3, sift your powder. Making matcha foam doesn't necessarily start with the mixing of the matcha tea, but even before, with the sifting of the powder. When matcha powder is exposed to the humidity in the air, it will begin to form clumps naturally. This does not mean that the matcha is low quality or that it has gone bad, but it does present a problem when it comes to making the matcha foam. The key to make a frothy matcha is making sure the powder is mixed evenly into the water. This can be difficult when you have a lot of clumps in your matcha, as these won't mix as well into the water. The solution is to simply run your matcha powder through a sifter before it goes into the bowl. This will remove the clumps and ensure that you have an easier time mixing the matcha powder in with the water. Tip number 4, use hot water but not boiling water. One of the mistakes people make when it comes to how to make matcha foam is that they use the water that is too cold. As we mentioned before, the key to make foamy bowls of matcha is to mix the powder evenly and well into the water. This is much more difficult when you're using cold water and the matcha seems to clump up more. To avoid this and get a nice matcha foam, you'll want to use warmer water at about 160 to 175 degrees Fahrenheit. If you use water that is hotter than that, the tea can become more bitter, so try to keep it within this range. Tip number 5, whisk the matcha with a proper technique. The final key step into making matcha foam is to whisk the tea the proper way. First, begin by scraping the sides of the bowl to make sure all the matcha powder is mixed into the bowl. Then you can gently scrape off the bottom of the tea bowl and begin to whisk up the matcha tea in this zigzag motion using rapid wrist movements. Once you learn this technique, the question of how to make frothy matcha shouldn't be much of a problem anymore. Now let's go through the instructions of how to make a matcha foam step by step. First, you will want to take 2 scoops of the chashaku spoon. Like the whisk, the teaspoon is made out of a single piece of bamboo, and it's the perfect tool for preparing matcha tea. If you put as much matcha powder as can fit in a single chashaku spoon, this should come out to about 1 gram of matcha powder. Use 2 heaping scoops of the chashaku and put it into the sifter, positioned on top of the bowl. What if you don't have a chashaku? If you don't have a chashaku, you can use a normal spoon, but you will need a different method to measure out the powder. You can use 1 teaspoon of matcha powder, which should come out to about 2 grams. If you need a chashaku, we can give you one for free in many of our matcha tea bundles, so it should be no problem to get one. Step number 2. Break up the clumps with a strainer and put the matcha in a bowl. This next step is often skipped, but it's very important when it comes to how to make matcha foam. After you have placed 2 grams of matcha powder on top of the sifter, you can then use your chashaku or any other spoon you might have to push the powder through. This step should only take a few seconds, and you should know when you're done when you have a layer of finely sifted powder on the bottom of the matcha bowl. What do you do if you don't have a strainer? Strainers can be found easily online, but if you don't have one, you can get rid of the clumps in another way. First, you can add a tiny bit of water to the matcha powder in the bowl, just enough to make it into a paste. When the matcha is in this paste, it will be much easier to find the clumps and smooth them out with your whisk. By the time you add the rest of the water in, it will pretty much be too late, so make sure you take care of the clumps here. This can be a good additional step to do even if you do have a sifter, as some clumps can form after the water is added to the powder. Step number 3. pouring in the water. Pour in 100 milliliters of 160 to 175 degrees water at the center of the tea bowl. After all the water has been poured in and the matcha powder and the water start to combine, it's time to move on to the next stage. Step number 4, whisking the matcha. The whisking motion is key when it comes to making a matcha foam. Make sure you keep your arm straight and whisk the tea with your wrist in small zigzag motions. Your whisking should form an M or a W shape. This motion may feel a bit unfamiliar at first, but you'll get used to it over time. So let's review what we learned. First, make sure you use high quality ceremonial grade matcha and mix 1 teaspoon of powder with 100 milliliters of water between 160 and 175 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, you take your bamboo tea whisk and whisk it very quickly with zigzag motions along the surface of the tea. If you follow all these steps, you will be able to make your own foamy bowls of matcha tea at home in no time. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any other questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Until then, we'll see you next time.